Mike quoted his dad a lot, and I'll quote my mom. She said, "Oh, if you're a smart man, you always marry above yourself." And Mike, you and I both did that really well. So, at this point in time in our evening's festivities, what we'd like to do is invite some members of the community to come up and sit in a panel, and here's your chance to have a conversation with Michael, with Bishop Curry, and ask questions, make statements, whatever you want, so keep the conversation going. And then following their statements, or if somebody feels compelled, I'll try to find you. Again, the lights are bright, but Julie will help me find you. If you have a question or you want to make a comment, to feel free. And so let's just make this conversational, because we are a member of one big family. So first, I'd like to ask that Mel Bringle, who's a professor of philosophy and religious studies at Brevard College, and she also coordinates our integrated studies major, and she has a lot to do with the new Presbyterian hymnal as well. So Mel, if you would come on up, please. Next after Mel, Carter Hayward. Carter is the first vice president of this local NAACP chapter. She's an Episcopal priest and a retired professor of theology. And if you didn't know this about Carter, when Michael and I went to divinity school in 1975, it seemed that a year or two or three earlier that there was this group called the 11 of Philadelphia, of the first women who were ordained as Episcopal priests. And let me tell you, that caused a stir, and we studied about it, and we talked about it. And then when I moved to Brevard, I met one of the infamous Philadelphia, quite an honor. Also one of our students, Richard Pettigo. Richard, if you would come forward. Richard is a Brevard College freshman from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's double majoring in wilderness leadership, experiential education, and business and organizational leadership. We say Willie and Borg. Richard, would you come and be with us? Next, we have another student from Brevard College, Gabby Smith. Gabby, if you would come forward. Gabby is on the other side of her education at Brevard. She's a senior. She's from High Point. And she's a double major in both English and a concentration in literary studies, and a minor in philosophy and religion. Sheila Mooney. Sheila's a school counselor at the Davidson River School and has a part-time private practice. She's also chair of the education committee for the NAACP. Thank you, Sheila. And now, finally, I would like to invite Tommy Kilgore, who's president of the Transylvania chapter of the NAACP, and he's the director for the Habitat for Humanity's Restore in the county. And Tommy will join us, and he will also close the session this evening. Thank you, Tommy. And I think my job will be to sort of moderate, and we'll just start. I'll ask Mel if she wouldn't mind asking a question and pass the microphone.
I think, yes. First of all, just thank you so much for being here, for enlivening this last day of classes of the spring semester. One of the classes that I've been teaching this semester is called Environmental Theology. In fact, Richard is a student in that class. And one of the things that class charges Christianity with is being anthropocentric, exclusively focused on the human. And you gave us a compelling charge to relate to all human beings as family and to transcend our tribalisms of self and city and nation and race. I wonder if you would even go so far as to say we need to transcend our tribalism of species and welcome non-human creation into our wider family.
I think that's where we're going. Francis of Assisi got there long before we did, and it was part of a recognition that because all created things come from one creator, they are all related. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the next. We're actually going there. And I don't think for example, I don't think it's an accident that efforts that restrict voting rights or that siphon off monies from public education through vouchers to private education unnecessarily, or that restrict or limit Medicaid funding coming from the federal, or that don't participate in the Affordable Care Act, or that make the poor poorer, also includes deregulation of environmental It's not an accident. It is related that the lack of concern for humanity leads to a lack of concern for the creation. It's all tied up together. And so I think you're absolutely right to move. We've got to move beyond just our own species, but all the species that have been created by that one creator. I think you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Michael, Bishop Michael, I am so thrilled that you are here and that this group of people has been able to share in hearing what you've just said to us, and I appreciate it so much, and grateful to the college and to my colleagues in the NAACP for getting you here, and grateful to you and Sharon for coming, so thank you. I took a few notes just as you were speaking, because my mind kept sort of shifting as to what I really wanted to ask, and here's what it is. I think the reason we are so moved by stories like the Muslim minister from Albania is because of the courage they show. And you think about King and so the other many people, Desmond Tutu's another person, who seem almost superhuman in their willingness to risk themselves in some way to take a stand, to do what is loving of their sisters and their brothers. And I believe that the apathy that we see so much among ourselves today, good people, I think that people are not basically individually evil on the whole, but I think many good people, white, black, brown, Asian, are apathetic in our midst. And I think that apathy, quite frankly, is largely rooted in fear. And so my question, and the fear of loss of reputation, fear of loss of money, loss of social standing and status, loss of life, of course, fear of difference, and all the many differences in our lives, and fear of being different species for that matter. But I think the apathy is rooted in the fear, and my question for the leaders of churches and synagogues, for leaders of colleges, for the NAACP, for all of us, is how do we encourage one another to come out of our shells and dare to help build this beloved community with one another? I believe fear is our chief demon, quite frankly.
We'll pass this one to everybody, because I don't have an easy answer to that, except that I do believe, and this may be where we have. And I say this as a religious leader who loves my tradition, but I say it, you can only authentically critique something that you love. And I do think that very often we in the church, and I can only speak from my perspective, but I know enough rabbis to know that they would concur, and a couple imams who would say the same thing, that very often we who are religious leaders have watered down the deeper truths of our faith to such an extent that the radical challenge of that faith gets missed Sunday by Sunday, and we replace it not with the prosperity gospel. We don't go that far. Thank God, we don't go that far. But with a feel-good gospel. And we can even do it on a Good Friday, where the brother got tortured and executed by the state, not for a feel-good gospel. And we get over it by having a lot of lilies on Easter Sunday. So I think part of that is us. We have allowed, and I think that may be the public church, if you will. I mean, I know the Christendom thing and all that. I think that's part of it. But I think you're also right. There's a deeper fear. I have a friend who says all of life is high school. I said, oh God, please tell me it's not. I thought I got out of that already. But there's a lot of truth to that the dynamics among adults and adult society is pretty much the hallways in high school. And there were a few people who were willing to stand out and be different, but the power of conformity just overwhelms the majority. And the majority that is good and decent often will sit by and be silent or look the other way. I mean, and I think that's high school. I mean, it's something in us as human beings, and it takes something extra to dare to be different. I mean, sitting on the stage with you is like an honor, because you dared to be different. And now women are getting ordained all over the Episcopal Church like it's just normal, because you did something abnormal and dared not to conform, but to be transformed. How do you help people become daring nonconformists? I actually believe that's why we're supposed to be in church. I really do. I think that's what going to church is about. It's actually being in a community that can help to reinforce you in walking a different walk, being different, loving when other folk would rather hate, helping you to do that, because when you get outside the doors of the church, it's going to be hard to do. But what's happened is we very often allowed the church community to take care of you, which is important, but not to take care of you so that you can be different out there. And I think that's where we have fallen short, and I've been a part of it.
I really like what you said with the watering down of the messages that I think the church is trying to send out. I've noticed at home in Charlotte that a lot of the congregation from the church that I come from is becoming more interested in messages that are based more on feelings, feeling good with the gospel, rather than looking at more intellectual and theologically based viewpoints. So I think it seems as if it's coming out of a desire for connection, really, that is maybe kind of almost goes around that intellectual side, maybe because people are afraid of being offended or offending other people, perhaps. So I think it seems as if we're starting to lose that a little bit. I mean, there's a great example, tonight of what you said about using those older texts to bring people together. So, I mean, where do you see those changes going? How, what are some specific things we could do to keep that more intellectual side that's maybe to bring the two together, so there's not a kind of a disagreement between the two? Where do you see that?
That really is a good question. I think you're talking about formation, of intentional formation of people for a different life. And I can only speak from the Christian tradition, but we would call it formation for following Jesus. And I had a parishioner when I was in Baltimore, Mary Miller, who was the executive director of the Episcopal Peace Fellowship for years. And Mary and I had this running debate about Jesus. And we both love Jesus. That wasn't the issue. It was about, Mary would often say, everybody loves Jesus at Christmas. But nobody wants to talk about the Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, or the Jesus casting out the money changers in the temple, or the Jesus and the reason he got crucified. He didn't get crucified because he was Charlie Brown. He got crucified because he took love seriously, the hard discipline of love. Now, I think for us, that is a matter of formation. How do we, and I don't mean just educate intellectually, but I mean the whole person. How do we form people as followers of Jesus of Nazareth in such a way that their lives actually look something like his? And I think that is transformative, not just like the Christmas Jesus, but a full-blooded one. And I think that will help. And I've got a feeling that in all of our traditions, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, the closer we get to the depth of those traditions, not just to the surface stuff, but to the depth of it, we'll find spiritual power if we're willing to help each other to get there. But I think it is a matter of formation, how we are forming people and then supporting them in that formation. You know, and I think about that, and I don't, there's the book, Norman Gersham's book, God's House, or the book is called something else, but the film was God's House. That community of Muslims, it's a very small community, but they had been formed in a teaching, and it really was kind of an aberrant community that kind of got isolated from the mainstream of Islam after the Ottomans and all that stuff. And if you look in their early teachings, they formed their community. It's kind of mystical. They talk about the light of God being in everybody. And so everybody, because the light of the same God's in everybody, you're connected to that person. And so life becomes incredibly, their children are formed to believe that. Now, I'm sure they have their church life like everybody else, but for the most part, they really, so when that foreign minister sent that message out, he had a receptive congregation. They were kind of already there. He just gave them a practical way to do it because they had been formed as people who really did believe that they were related to everybody else, and therefore their actions in relation to everybody else had to conform to being related to. But that was a result of them being formed by that community that way. And so I think the intellectual, the emotional, and the volitional, how you actually live that out, is tied up in how we really form people as followers of the depth of their tradition, not the shallows. And if we do that, they'll go. But yeah. Thank you.
The other day when they asked me to be a panelist, I said I was going to look you up and look at some of your viewpoints. And I came across a video of you, and you were giving your response to Amendment 1. And I was really intrigued by it. And then when you first started this, you defined yourself as a humanist, and you said that a lot of times NC legislation is very biased against certain, I guess, subsects of people. And I think recently the big issue that we've come across is transgender rights. And North Carolina is one of the states that hasn't really thought about instituting a law against conversion therapy, which has been proven really bad. And so I was wondering what your opinions are on this. What do you think would be the way to push North Carolina legislation towards probably trying to do something like that? How do we make progress? And how do we get religious, I guess, ideology to back this up? Because I think a lot of people feel that the reason they don't want to get behind this is because religiously they think it's wrong.
What is it? In Ecclesiastes it says the race is not to the swift, but to those who persevere. This is where perseverance is going to matter. Conversion therapy is not therapy. It is abuse. It is. And that finally, yeah, it really is. Every American psychiatric, psychological associations are very clear. Finally, we've gotten there. So that's clear. Right now, that's why I said the race is not to the swift, but to those who persevere. Right now, one of the struggles that we're working on now is to prevent this Religious Freedom Act. Now, hopefully it won't get through. Apparently it's been tabled in one of the houses, but anyway, we've got to prevent that, which uses religious language and imagery as an excuse for bigotry. I mean, we might as well get real about that. That any legislation that allows anybody to discriminate in public accommodations against anybody else, that is discrimination, and it is wrong. The Montgomery bus boycott was fought over that. The civil rights movement was fought over that. And that wasn't just about black folk getting their rights. That was about every human child of God having equal rights in this great country. And we have got to get our beloved state to get to that place. It's not there yet. And one step is to prevent this Religious Freedom Act, which is a misnomer that has nothing to do with religious freedom. It has to do with enshrining discrimination in the name of religion. And I think people like us here have to get that message out and keep saying it and keep saying it. I long for the day when North Carolina will protect the rights of all. We're not there yet, but we have to keep the struggle going. I can tell you that It's not that I'm an optimist, because actually you're asking a deeper question. I hear a really deeper question. I believe that Dr. King, he got it from a 19th century abolitionist, but when he said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it is bent toward justice. I believe that that's true. I believe that justice will be done, and that the right will prevail. Because I believe in Easter. I believe wrong prevailed on Good Friday and right triumphed on that Sunday. And I believe that about this world, but it doesn't happen automatically. It happens because people like us, people of goodwill, people of faith and goodwill and decency come together and work together to transform it, to transform society. And so I think we're going to have to be affirmative in moving toward equal rights, affirmative with our state legislature. And part of being affirmative means getting out the vote. Right? I mean, it means getting out the vote. That's critical, and that's a long distance run, but that is critical to get out the vote, to raise what I believe really is the sensible center in our state. I do not believe that most people in the state of North Carolina would countenance or support discrimination or bigotry in any way, shape, manner, or form if they were clear about that. Not most people. There's some, but not most people. And we have got to figure out ways to rally the sensible center and to get that sensible center to speak up to create a society for all. And gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people are at the heart of that. Equal rights and equal justice means equality for all. Shirley Chisholm, do y'all remember Shirley Chisholm? Yeah. Shirley Chisholm, I remember I forgot how she phrased it or what occasioned it, but she used to say, we all came, talking about America, U.S., she said, we all came over here on different ships, but we all in the same boat now. and that really is true. And if we can get each other to work together, because we're all in the same boat, we can make it. But it's going to be a long distance run, and there are going to be setbacks. There's going to be moments of progress, and then there's setbacks, and then more progress. But I also think that's why we're in religious communities, because it is community that gives you the strength, or that's supposed to give you the strength and a sense of a vision that's bigger than us, and that there's a higher power. That gives you the courage. Actually, it gets back to who was asking about courage. That's where the courage sometimes comes from. Because I have to admit, I'm a coward. I'm not gonna lie. I'm as much of a coward. I like Michael and I like my hide. And so there's a part of me that would like to keep Episcopalians real happy, and so that they would give generously and all that. There's a part of me that would rather not say some stuff that I know is gonna upset some. But sometimes you have to figure out what you have to do so that you can look yourself in the mirror. And for all of us, that takes courage, which I remember, don't ask me why, I've been on a Paul Tillich thing lately for some reason, but the courage to be, that he said that the courage to be courage is not being crazy and not being afraid of anything. He said courage is always in spite of your fears. It is in spite of it. It's the courage to love in spite of the temptation to hate, or the courage to affirm life in spite of the threat of death and all that. Courage means to overcome your fear and do it anyway. That's courage. And that's what we in communities can rally each other to run that long distance race to get where you're talking about.
When you first asked that question, I leaned over to Tommy and said, we have to wait for some people to die. Thank you so much for being with us. I must say I was so impressed that you could use Kim and Dr. King in the same. That's all right. That's all right. It makes me wonder about your genealogy. I'm curious about true religion. You mentioned that. several times. I'm wondering if you would talk some more about true religion, and maybe that would be what it would take for us to be that family of God.
I remember a couple years ago, professor at Wake Forest at the university wrote a book called When Religion Gets Sick. And it's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember in it, he talked about when religion gets sick, basically, the perversion of religious truths and the depth of religion being perverted and distorted and all that kind of stuff. And he said, he isolated several factors, and I don't remember all of them, about healthy religion. That healthy religion is life-giving. Healthy religion is ennobling. In other words, it helps us to be better than we would be left on our own devices. It ennobles us. That healthy religion actually connects us. It doesn't exclude us. It actually connects us to others, like you're saying, to creation. I don't know if he got that far, but he was heading in that direction, that it connects us. I think, and I was using it in a quick way by saying healthy religion blesses. It doesn't curse. It doesn't diminish. It doesn't reduce. It doesn't make us smaller. It doesn't cause us to hate or to exclude. Healthy religion actually gives life. If it doesn't have any of those characteristics, something's probably sick. Something's probably sick. And I do think, I think it is important, I mean, for us who, of whatever our religious tradition or whatever our personal conviction, whether people of religious conviction, people of humanistic conviction, people of goodwill and decency, to come together where they do have common ground and to work together. I just think I think it's gonna, look, the truth is we're all here. Whether we like it or not, we're neighbors. I mean, so we might as well make the best of it, right? I mean, just on a pragmatic level. I mean, let's make the best of it. And I think part of that has to do with religion. I think it was Hans Kuhn who said, there will never be peace on earth. There will never be peace on earth until there is peace among the religions. And he meant religions in the strict sense of a religion, but he also meant in terms of ideologies. Strongly held, passionate convictions. Until there is peace across all of that, there will never be peace on earth. And a lot of times what's going on, at least I think, a lot of times what's going on is we can use religion to work out our own ego issues and needs. And religion just becomes the metaphor, the language that get used for it. But we can use religion, and people have done that throughout the century. But if people of religious faith learn how to cross bridges and learn how to be in relationships without watering down whatever their faith is, that's not about that, but actually going deeper, I'm not an expert on the politics of the thing, but I can tell you that, well, I'll give you an example. This was 2 years ago, when we had some hopes of comprehensive immigration reform on the federal level. And it was in the summer, I think it was 2 summers ago. And the Latino Coalition and others had asked groups of us to meet several members of Congress. And so I made several of the calls and went to see this one particular congressman. I won't say his name, but one particular congressman. And when we were meeting, I said to him, this is something that the Roman Catholic Bishop of Raleigh and I agree on. I said, now, when you see the two of us agree, you might want to pay attention to that. And you know what he said? He said, I know, the Southern Baptists were in here this morning making the same point. I mean, and he had taken notice of the fact that religious traditions that don't necessarily agree on all the social were actually agreeing on this one. And when we said there's a couple of imams weren't with us, but there were imams who were part of this conversation, and rabbis and others, they were at other Congress folk. When we said this is not just ecumenical, this is interfaith. You're talking about the religions of North Carolina now. That gets noticed. And I think if people of faith, I think Moral Monday has helped with that, has moved in that direction. People of faith finding common ground in our humanity and making this world and this planet better. That's where we got common ground, because we got common self-interest and nothing else. But boy, if we can get that to gel and crystallize. The truth is, the passage of the Voting Rights Bill in 1963, the president wanted it to happen, but needed political, not cover is not the right word, but he needed muscle. And it was Dr. King's call for people to come to Selma. If it had just been the civil rights workers, that wouldn't have been a game changer. But Protestant, Catholics, and Jews, black and white, came together and marched across that bridge and from Selma to Montgomery. And that got the attention of the nation. If the religious traditions, if we would join hands in common cause for a better humanity and a better world, even if it's just on one thing, that will get paid attention to. I think you put your finger on something. We get these religions to stop fussing and worrying about our territory. We could actually change the world for some good.
Thank you. Well, let's open this up to anybody in the auditorium that would care to ask a question or make a statement. If you'll raise your hand wildly so I can see you, and we'll get a mic, make sure we get you to a microphone. Anybody have anything to say? Yes, please, come forward. We have a microphone here and one over there. This is your closest one, right there. It'd be helpful if you tell us your name and then make your statement. It's on. Yes.
Bishop Curry, thank you. I was deeply inspired. I'm Darlene Odell, and we met back in the summer. I have a question about gender, and about gender. You addressed that so beautifully in the genealogy of Matthew, and it seems to me that a lot of the oppression that we're talking about has to do with the way we imagine God. And I wonder, one, how someone like you who delivers that beautiful sermon actually imagines God. And do you think that there is a problem with God as a male figure? And is that creating some of the problems that we have? Thank you.
Well, I'd have to be a fool to say no, but yeah. You know, it really is. I mean, that is, and I mean, human beings, I mean, I'm one of them. We're capable, oh yeah, I am one of them, but I mean, we're capable of metaphor and engaging. We are pretty literal. I mean, we are. We start out, we all do. And I think it's going to be more critical, and this is going to be interesting how this gets worked out in our church traditions, to begin to live into the breadth and the depth of imagery, and for the God who is spirit and bigger than anything we can even remotely conceive of. Lauren Winter, who teaches at Duke, has a new book out on, I think it just came out on, and she's just working with the manifold biblical images about God. I mean, beyond, the shepherd and, our Father in heaven and all, and those are fine. But what she's done is mine the scriptures, and there's a lot of imagery of God that has nothing, it's not male. There's imagery of God as a piece of cloth, imagery of God as, well, we've got the potter and the clay. Apparently there's a lot more imagery than we've ever paid attention to, especially in the Hebrew scriptures, that clearly is looking beyond, Paul Tillich, going back to Tillich again, once said, God is always the God beyond. As soon as you think you've got God captured, God is bigger than that. Because see, if you think you've captured him, you ain't captured God. God is always beyond. And so she's been working with what are some of those other images? I know that some hymn writers are working with some of that to begin to stretch us, because I do think it does impact our self-understandings, and it inadvertently slips into notions of masculinity and femininity that are more cultural and not theological. I mean, it just kind of happens that way. So that the more we can stretch the imagery and begin to realize, man, this is a big God we're talking about. This is God. This isn't us with a loud voice. This is God we're talking about. And stretch and realize that all of our language is metaphor, and symbol is that finger pointing to the greater reality that's God. The finger's not God. It's pointing to that great. And imagery and language that stretches us beyond where we are can actually help us get closer. Some of the mystics, who was Julian of Norwich, talked about God, our mother. And actually, if you look in Isaiah, especially Isaiah 65, 66, toward the end of the book, it's like this prophet all of a sudden starts stretching the language. He sees God as a mother in labor. That's in the Bible. That wasn't a 21st century theologian. So that even they're stretching to reach out to this God who is greater than we are. And I think that's what you're really getting at. And I think that would help us with our own self-understanding. Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that.
Thank you. We have another person over here, if you want. The microphone right in front of you, sir.
Bishop, my name is Dennis. I'm a member of the Episcopal Church here. My grandparents and my family were all Albanian immigrants, and they were Sufi Muslims. I want to thank you. I almost fell out of my chair. You're the first public person I've ever heard mention that about our history, and I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you for your family, sir.
My name is Attracta Hutchinson. I would like to echo Dr. Odell's sentiment about gender and how much it affects everything. It pervades religion and society and so on. And this is something that really, really needs to be addressed if humanity is to grow and become as a family. That's point number one. It's not a question, just my comment. The other thing is, I believe that with especially in this country, our increased prosperity increases our comfort zone. And sometimes in the comfort of pillows and feathers and, all the goodies that we have, we forget about the pain that is so evident in other parts of the world. And it really behooves us to pay more attention to that and step outside our comfort zone and relate to the rest of humanity. And I think we fall far short of that. One of your ladies up there had mentioned that. I think we're lax in that, I really do. And it's so easily forgotten in our comfort to relate and go beyond that to helping, to reach out, to be compassionate and so on. Because in the end, isn't that why we are here on this planet? To be compassionate, to learn, to look around and see what needs to be done and do it. We're not just here to sit in the easy chair. We're here to get out of that and go and help, be compassionate, loving, kind, and end the pain that others are feeling. And that's just simply my statement on that. Thank you.
My name is Philip Thomas, and I'm a new resident of Brevard. My husband of 2 years and I moved here back last May. We have been together for 22 years. And during that time, I also served another denomination as a minister and was totally accepted and loved and cared for in burying their parents and loving their children through youth groups and building their churches and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ to churches before I decided to make the statement that I am an openly gay male in this denomination. From that point, I was moved away from where I had always been served the same church for nearly 22 years in Atlanta. It was there that I lived and became a part of the young men dying of AIDS when my church was doing 15 to 20 services a month because nobody else in that city would stand up and say that equality and liberty and justice is for all people, not just the few who think they're right. So what I would say to you tonight, that I think that Rick and I have moved to the right community. I think we've moved somewhere that before we moved, we were afraid to move here. And I called the church, in which we're members at now, St. Philip's, and I asked Father Rob if we would be welcome there. He got back to me in a couple of weeks. Of course, he said, you're welcome here. But he said, I want to take this to the vestry. And the night he took it to the vestry, they said to him, probably one of the most Republican people on the vestry. You can tell I'm a Democrat, but one of the most Republican said to him, why would they not be welcome? Because our mission statement says we're a loving, diverse congregation and community of believers. So I would say to you, as you continue to do this work in this community, that you're doing the right thing and that you're upholding the standards of who Jesus was on this earth in a mighty, mighty, mighty way. And my hat's off to you, and I applaud each one of you for being who you are and for what you have done. God bless you.
My name is Kathleen Barnes. I'm curious, I know in Raleigh and on the national scene too, we hear many, many politicians say they are doing what they are doing in the name of Jesus, in the name of Christianity, in the name of their religion. How do you reconcile that with what you're saying tonight? Can you? I don't know.
Well, I have, at least in terms of the General Assembly, we've not always been able to be in dialogue, to be honest. So that's been a part of the reality. But when I've had occasion to be in conversation, I have actually just said, all right, let's just do the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Is this legislation that you would want your children or your grandchildren to have to live under? Is this what, is that, and if somebody can say there's not much I can say to change that mind, but that could be a game changer if somebody would engage that. And, again, it involves somebody being willing to be in conversation and dialogue. Because my position has been, certainly in the Episcopal, and I'm seeing people I've seen on that mall, from here, and you all had to come from Asheville, from up here to Raleigh for those 5 o'clock rallies. And I'm seeing some familiar faces. Some of y'all were arrested too, I can see you. But I would argue that there are some common values that we do share, that Jesus was very clear when asked by a lawyer what was the greatest of the laws of Moses. Jesus was very clear. He pulled together two passages, one from Deuteronomy and the other from Leviticus. Good old Leviticus. From Leviticus, you shall love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. On these two depend all the law and the prophets. Now, I don't care what stripe of Christianity you come from. That was Jesus, and that is unambiguous and clear. So if you are in the state government, in the legislature, then you tell me, does this piece of legislation reflect the love of God that you learned about in Jesus of Nazareth? Now, if you can tell me that it does, then ain't nothing I can do. But most people of goodwill will think twice and figure out, okay, is this consistent with the values I say I hold? Now, there's some things over which there's just disagreement, and there's not much you can do. But there are other times when we do share a common heritage of values, and you can sometimes call people to their higher natures, and there will be a response. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. I mean, I do remember Remember when Bobby Kennedy took legislators of both parties, this was the day when compromise was possible, to actually see poverty, people who were poor? Remember when he did that? It did change hearts. It did, because there were some common values. I refuse to believe that there aren't common values that we actually do share. The trick is getting to the point of being in conversation about them and how do you apply them. So the answer, I'm sort of answering your question, and others may have a better answer. I don't have a quick answer to that except that I really do believe in a gospel of love. And I believe in it. And I believe in it not because of Michael, but I believe in it because Jesus said it. And so I'm willing to go toe-to-toe with my brothers and sisters who are of more conservative stripe. I said, that's fine. I'm just talking about what's in the book. And I don't know how it works, but that's the best I can do. And
Yes, I have to weigh in a little bit too. I think one of my lifelong frustrations is when people use religion as a means to get to an end instead of let religion use them to achieve a different end. And I guess it's a priori, post priori, what comes first. When religion is used as a weapon, whether it's figuratively or literally, it always scares the hell out of me, and I mean that literally. Anybody else have anything else to say? We'll take two more, and then I'm going to ask Tommy to wrap it up, sir. So if you wouldn't mind coming, sir, and I saw a hand over here. Yes, sir. Are you, Steve-O, you guys can duke it out, or you can come up to. Yes.
My name is Larry Goodwin. I am one of the founding members and current officer in the local NAACP branch and fully believe in the values exposed there. But that's not where I came from. I grew up in a totally segregated South Florida, went all the way through university, never had a black student in my class. Came from a family whose teachings would make Archie Buncher's teachings look to the left of where we were. And I find I've had to work very, very hard at doing away with some of these old lessons. But I know even now, without wanting to, some of those old lessons can creep up on me. And I don't want them to be there and have to work very hard not to give in to those old discriminatory teachings. I have difficulty dealing with people that say they absolutely have no discriminations whatsoever, that we've got laws that says that everybody's equal, so we don't need the efforts of organizations like NAACP. We don't need equal opportunity. How would you suggest we try to deal with these people that generally do not understand the subtle nature of these discriminations?
you know what I think? I think we can take a lesson from those who have been in leadership in gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered concerns. The tide in the American public opinion has actually turned. It's already turned. It actually has. I didn't think it was going to turn this fast. I knew it was going to turn, but I didn't expect it. And I could be wrong, but I think it turned dramatically because we started hearing people's stories and meeting real people we knew. When people started coming out and then telling their story, then even Dick Cheney said, "That's my daughter, leave her alone." That was a game changer. And I think a way to get at that is kind of what Bobby Kennedy did, that same kind of thing. We got to help people come and meet other people who are in fact impacted by certain pieces of either legislation or the way things are constructed. To actually meet somebody who is working hard in McDonald's at minimum wage and who didn't have health coverage before the Affordable Care Act but might have it now. To actually meet that person. They're not lazy, they're working hard. President Obama was right when he said in Congress, if you think people can live off of the minimum wage, try it. right? And so I really do think if we can get people to meet other people, to be in relationship with, part of the problem is we've got poverty so segregated and hidden that most people don't see it. When I was in Baltimore, we used to say we had a subway to get under it, had a skyway to get over it, and a beltway to get around it, but you never had to see it. And we've actually got poverty in sections of our communities. I mean, Southeast Raleigh is hidden in Raleigh. And there are sections in our community, and so people don't actually run into other people and hear their stories and realize, wait a minute, these people are impacted by this. And I think that experience of another person and hearing their story actually could be a game changer if we can get that to happen more often. But it's hard.
Thank you. There was one more gentleman over here.
And I have often felt, and Carter, your comment about apathy coming from fear, for me, it's a matter of feeling, what difference can I make? And so I have received emails from organizations that I trust saying, please call the senator, please call the White House, encourage them to vote for or against, so forth. And I've done that occasionally, but one more body for the tally. But at a workshop I was at this past weekend, the point was made by a former Senate staffer who said, with the information you have from these organizations, especially if it's not a huge bill, you probably know more about the issue than the staffer you're talking to does. And that gave me hope. Bishop, have you had the experience of educating congressional staffers or state representative staffers and so forth, and telling them something they really didn't know other than showing up with the Catholic priest?
Thank you very much. At this point, Tommy, would you like to come and close our session? Oh, do we have another name?
He asked the question, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The answer is yes. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's okay. Yeah. Again, now these were, I can think of legislators who were open and whose staffs were open. And there has been around immigration reform in particular, this is a couple of years ago, but around immigration reform, when we would be the most powerful thing that got their attention, and in this case, these were Republican legislators, were young people who would go with us, who were undocumented themselves. I remember one young man who was a student at Carolina. These are upstanding young people. These are young people who can make a positive contribution to this society. And for them to sit in that office with that member of Congress and with a senator, and for that senator or their aides to have to look them in the eyeball and realize that that young person could make a contribution to this country if we would reform our immigration system. That they didn't come here, Anyway, the point is they actually were what some folk in church call the living testimony. I don't think it's an accident that folk testify in church. It ain't no preacher's great idea that gets folks saved. It's the testimony of a life well lived. That's what hooks. And I think, and that does sometimes, I've seen it, I actually have seen it. It was around immigration reform, and that did make the connection. And the staffers would take that, and that gave them something to work with.
Forward together, not one step back. I want to thank Bishop Curry for bringing a conversation, for bringing a testimony, for bringing information that we need to move forward as a community, as sisters and brothers together, hand in hand. But we need to move. We don't need to hear conversation. We don't need to hear lectures and then go our separate ways. As we part these doors, we need to take it back to our homes, to our churches, to our communities, so that the movement will spread social justice, love, and equality for all people. This is the goal of the NAACP in bringing these events to you, to the community. We hope that in the future we'll be bringing other events that will stimulate, that will be eye-opening, that will be honest and straightforward, and will open our eyes to exactly what is going on so that
as a community of individuals, as a community of those gathered, we can grow as brothers and sisters in love and fulfill the scriptures. Fulfill the scriptures that our Lord and Savior handed down to us to love one another. For the greatest of all is love. If we cannot have political love, if we cannot have social love, if we cannot have love of equality, what can we have? We must have all these things to bring together this whole essence of what the bishop has tried to bring to us. I want to thank President I want to thank President Kurt for opening up Brevard College to us. I want to thank the St. Philip's Episcopal Church for participating in this event with us. I want to thank the members of the NAACP. I want to thank those on this panel for bringing out candid, open, straightforward questions that will open our eyes to the realities and to the events that are going on around us at a community level, at a state